paraphrased and supplemented Dio's words for their own purposes. These are, in essence, fragments of Dio's work, and they are more fragmentary and confused than they appear when bound in a pretty translation. This leaves just Suetonius's biographies, which would be fine if they were biographies of Agrippina, but they're not. They are the biographies of the men that Agrippina was attached to. Suetonius is interested only in the motivations and actions of the subjects of his biographies, and so the women in their lives, like our Agrippina, slip silently into the background, to be brought out only when her presence could tell the reader something interesting about the more important man. Trying to pry a Roman person, let alone a Roman woman, out of these fragmented, scattered sources is hard enough, but, on top of the holes, the bits we do have are moralizing in the extreme. Virtually the first thing that Tacitus tells us in his annals is that he will write without malice or partisanship, a sweet promise that his history is merely the dispassionate recitation of objective facts. At the same time, though, he also tells us that he picks and chooses what to tell us about any given year because he believes that the historian has a duty to tell history that is moral and instructive. A historian should actively praise good behavior and condemn wickedness. In the same sentence, he tells us that the Julio-Claudian period of which he writes was a tainted and wicked age, which, although I strongly suspect that he did indeed believe this was a dispassionate and objective fact, is an opinion. Of course, the reader of Tacitus will have noticed that he's not being as objective as he claims as soon as he starts telling us what his characters were thinking. This happens for the first time in Book 1, Chapter 1 of the Annals, when Tacitus insists that Augustus gave his grandsons the made-up title Princes of Youths with pretend reluctance. For the general reader, this is all the better, as Tacitus is hilariously catty and tells a brilliant anecdote, as we shall see. For the historian or biographer, though, it is a pissing nightmare, because it means that every fact that Tacitus gives us is twisted and manipulated and carefully presented to tell a story that fits his overall narrative of moral decline and Roman degradation. And, quite often, Tacitus's narrative includes mind-reading to make his story work. Within that narrative, Agrippina looms large as a symbol of everything that is wrong with the imperial system. Suetonius is equally moralizing, but in a less sophisticated way. He is simultaneously more and less useful to the biographer than Tacitus because, as one of the Emperor Hadrian's freedmen, he had access to an awful lot of letters and documents and liked to show that off. This means that we all get to read Augustus's letter to Livia in which he tries to decide whether her grandson Claudius is mentally incapacitated or merely externally revolting. And that's obviously great. On the other hand, he also liked to throw every single thing he heard, read, or thought about the subjects of his biographies down on the page and present rumor, letters, personal experience, narratives taken from histories, and things he read written on walls as equal facts, often without telling us what is what. At the same time, he threw all of these things on the page in a thematic fashion rather than a chronological one. So the good deeds of Caligula from his whole reign are crammed into the first 20 chapters of his biography, while the bad deeds then take up the next 36 chapters, giving the strong impression that Caligula was good for a while and then went bad. Meanwhile, the family members of the imperial subject float around in the background of these context-free, thematically linked anecdotes, appearing and disappearing as the narrative of each chapter demands. In essence, Suetonius's biographies have a tendency to read like a badly cited off-brand wiki page for Barack Obama, one littered with citation needed notes and a references list that treats White House publications and the above top secret conspiracy forums as sources with equal weight. This is an important point. Not one of our ancient literary sources would pass even the most basic Wikipedia test. Every one of them would be, at the very least, subject to a strongly worded header that warned the reader that a lot of this was drawn from a single source. Barely a sentence would survive even the most